In this lecture, we're going to talk about using discernment. Some books are helpful in building our children's faith. Some books can actually hurt our children's faith. Of course, doubt comes from all sorts of sources, from external sources and internal sources. What we don't want to do is give our children books that will kind of lead them away from the faith. So, first of all, what we don't want to do is give them books that sow seeds of doubt. Believe it or not, there are Christian books that can sow seeds of doubt. Little children don't need to know so much about why Jesus was killed. Of course, it was part of God's plan. They need to know that Jesus died for the forgiveness of their sins as a substitutionary atoning penal death. They don't need to know that some people thought Jesus was lying, that Jesus wasn't the Son of God. They need to hear very clearly, Jesus is God. That's the message they need to hear. They don't need to hear that people thought maybe Jesus was crazy. They don't need to hear that. That's not helpful for them. So if there are only 32 pages in the whole book, we don't even want half of a page to be devoted to putting little seeds of doubt in their minds. So number one, we don't need to give them books that sow seeds of doubt. Number two, we don't need to give them books that will be confusing for them. We want books that will be clear. As an example, there's a very popular book right now that talks about God's keep out sign. So after the Garden of Eden, there was a keep out sign. The curtain in the temple was like a big keep out sign. This is a kind of a confusing idea, I think. There are more clear, direct ways to communicate the gospel to children, in my opinion. Number three, we don't want to give children books that have misinformation. There's a book that has raised tens of thousands of dollars through Kickstarter that has in it the information that the emperor, the Roman emperor, wanted to kill Jesus. Of course, that's not true. You could kind of stretch it around with Pilate and maybe make it work, but we don't really need to give them misinformation when there are plenty of books that give them clear, true information and give them the facts. So, number four, we don't want to give them books that are not appropriate in terms of their age. So books that have too much information, or as a close corollary, books that have inappropriate pictures, gory pictures, bloody pictures, pictures of Goliath or others who look scary and murderous, books that have inappropriate pictures of Adam and Eve. We just really need to use discernment. Okay, next up, we don't want to have books with too much text. If there is too much text, they might turn our kids off of the faith. So we don't want to include those kinds of books. Books that are like other books, but not as good. There's a really good book by Haley Warner. I believe it's called The Gospel Story or something like that. There's another book that's very similar, but not as good as that book. So try to find the book that is the real book and not a copycat book or an inferior version of another book that exists. So these are the kinds of books that we want to avoid. I hope that's helpful for you.